The 2023 budget, lots of positive feedbacks, and that being Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim's first budget under a unity government. Some described it the perfect budget. It's all about striking that balance in protecting the welfare of the people and addressing the needs of the business community. I'm Muhammad Ahmad Hamdan, and this is Money Matters. Hello there and welcome to Money Matters. I have a very interesting person right here in the studio with me, Deputy Finance Minister Sim Chee Keongspeaks. Welcome to Sri Pentas and to our program.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Stephen, okay. Now, why I said he's an interesting person is because he made the nation proud when he was named as a young global leader of the Geneva-based World Economic Forum, and that was in 2012. Right, Stephen, you were Deputy Youth and Sports Minister before, your last portfolio in the Cabinet.
That's right.
And now you're with the Finance Ministry. You've also been the MP for Bukit Mertajam for about 10 years, since 2013. You yourself is a computer engineer graduate. You've served in a multinational company for about 3 years, quite an illustrious background, I would say. How has the transition been like for you at the Finance Ministry?
Thank you, Mohammed.
Sure.
It's a pleasure for me to be here. I've been following Money Matters when I was young, and I know you have stopped the program for a number of years, and you've revived back the program.
Very cool.
I think we have to hit the ground running, to put it simply. I came from an engineering background. Of course, I did my graduate degree in development. Not many people know about this.
Okay.
In fact, the title of my thesis, I was studying on DFI's, Development Financial Institution in Malaysia.
Ah, so it's still finance related.
It's finance related. It's development related. So, in particular, Bank Simpanan Nasional, which is now under the purview of the Ministry of Finance.
Right.
So I think it is a very nice coincidence. But transition has been smooth, mainly because not only because of my background, my academic background, etc., but also because I think I'm working with a group of very, very professional staff in the ministry. And I've been looking up to them, have utmost respect from them since I was in KBS. And coming into the ministry at this point, I felt that these are among some of the best minds in the civil service.
Right. Okay. Now, Stephen, let's move on to the revised 2023 budget, which was tabled by the Prime Minister last Friday. Now, the revised 2023 budget has largely received the thumbs up from the public. Was it challenging? That's the question. Was it challenging to strike that balance between, being there for the rakyat and also at the same time make the business community happy?
I look at the title and you say this is the perfect budget, of course.
Well, some people describe it as perfect budget. I know.
I won't call it a perfect budget because there's no such thing as a perfect budget.
I agree.
think what we want to do here is to look at what are the issues that are facing the country today, what are the issues that are facing the people, business community, and then work towards resolving or dealing with these issues, especially vis-a-vis government budgeting.
Yeah.
It is not easy. Definitely, there are trade-offs. When you tax somebody, you have to when you tax somebody, they won't be happy. When you give money to a certain sector, another sector may not have as much resources. It's not easy to track that balance, but I think in general, the Prime Minister has presented a well-balanced budget in the sense that we are looking and dealing with the most immediate, most urgent issues, rebuilding the SMEs post-crisis year, rebuilding our middle class. I think this is very important.
Yeah.
And at the same time, helping the people to cushion the rising cost of living while we are working on the longer term solutions.
Now, a well-balanced budget, I think that is, a better way of saying it, describing the budget rather than saying that it's a perfect budget. I totally agree with you on that. Now, the new 2023 budget is bigger than the previous ones. This is despite concerns over the country's long-time fiscal deficit situation. Has this become a trend now in Malaysia where every year is another record budget year? Is it sustainable to have an expansionary budget year after year? After all, it's been, 3 consecutive years in a row, if I'm not wrong?
Mohammed, the country has seen a deficit budget for the last, 20, 25 years. If you look at the budget nominally, yes, this is the highest budget ever. But if you look at it as a ratio of the GDP, which is commonly done, we are at the region of about 20% of the GDP. During the Asian financial crisis, we have hit 21% of the GDP. During the global financial crisis, we have almost hit 30% of the GDP, 28.9% of the GDP. So I think if we look at it from that perspective, we are still manageable. Of course, there is a lot of worry about deficit, and this is why the Prime Minister has projected a budget with a lower deficit, 5.0% compared to last year. I think the big budget is not the main issues. It is how we finance the budget. It is how we deal with our debt. It is how we spend the money responsibly.
But we also have another budget coming up, which will be tabled also this year in November. And is that also going to be, what the size of the budget is a question that people have in their minds. Is it also going to be another big budget next year? And how is the government going to address that?
No, like I say, I think the size of the spending is not the biggest problem. We have to look at how the money is being spent and how do we finance this budget. And in that perspective,
I think the concern also probably comes from the debt level of the country, which I'm going to touch later on. That is where mainly the worries come from. When you talk about the size of the budget.
Again, like I say, there must be fiscal discipline, no doubt. And in fact, with bigger spending in terms of, let's say, the development expenditure, we have a big development expenditure this year, 97 billion. Bigger money, more money for people, more money for development, but at the same time, it is accompanied by, firstly, strategic focus on key basic infrastructure instead of, say, mega projects. So the Prime Minister has announced that he's going to build and upgrade hospital, clinics, schools, road facilities. Even, I'm surprised he said that in his speech, of course, he said that there's going to be 100,000 ringgit per district to deal with, immediate dealing with potholes. So these are basic infrastructure. So very focused, very strategic. And number two, very disciplined in the sense that all procurement is going to be open tender, and the government is going to introduce the FRA, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and Government Procurement Act. This is basically landmark fiscal disciplining measures. It never happened before in this country. So bigger budget, but more focused, more strategic, and at the same time more disciplined.
I actually would agree with you, especially when you said that there's specific allocation to address pothole problems, which is a legacy issue in Malaysia. We all know that, and that being addressed in the budget it shows that the government is actually really serious about the well-being of the people. Now we're going to go for a short break right now, but don't go away because we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. We have a special guest today, Deputy Finance Minister Stephen Sim. Now, Stephen, just before the break, you mentioned a little bit on the country's debt level. My question is, the country's actual debt level now accounts for about 63% of GDP. Now, this leaves a small room of about 2% for new debts. Because, you know, the statutory debt limit is set at 65% of GDP.
Yeah.
Is this enough to fund the 2023 budget apart from tax collection?
Mohammed,
on the borrowing side?
Mohammed, the debt has always been a concern. The country's debt has always been the concern of Malaysians in the past few years. Yes, we are. In fact, you know, post-pandemic, we have almost hit the statutory debt ceiling at 65%.
Right.
But to me, and I hope I'm not misquoted for this, to me, the country's debt is not the biggest issue. I'm not saying that this is not a problem. I say it's not the biggest problem. Why? Because essentially we must ask ourselves, number one, what is our debt funding? You know, where this debt money is going into. Number two, how are we going to service our debt? So basically, in other words, where are we spending our money? You know, and then secondly, how are we going to pay back our debt? I think these are closely related, and these are the key questions that we should be asking. Which is why I said earlier, the money that we're going to spend is focused, is strategic. It's not, you know, if you are going to take up a debt and then waste it on corruption, on wastages, on leakages, then this is unproductive. You are basically taking up money for nothing. But if your money goes into, say, reviving the economy, creating jobs, or supporting, rebuilding SMEs post-crisis years, then you will be looking at returns in other forms. You'll be looking at returns in terms of tax. You'll be looking at returns in terms of investment, foreign and domestic. And this is where we look into how you're going to raise revenue to service our debt. I
know what you're talking about, and I actually agree with that. But also, is there a possibility that the government is going to raise the statutory debt limit to 70% of the GDP now?
I think at this point, I don't see any need for that at this point, because not only we are able to reduce our deficit this year through a more disciplined spending, but the Prime Minister has also projected a further reduction by 2025 to 3.2%. So I think the key point here is how we can discipline ourselves in spending, how we can ensure that there is growth when it comes to spending our money, and how we can ensure that we will have a better revenue base.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's whether we are able to service the debts. That's, I think, the more important aspect of looking at, you know, the debt level. Right. And the proposal to introduce the capital gains tax (CGT) next year, some say that it could hamper efforts to attract investors, according to analysts especially. Is this a real concern to the Finance Ministry?
The capital gain tax is not a new thing in Malaysia. You know, we have had the RPGT, real property gain tax. So this is another type of capital gain tax. And this round, the government is planning to introduce capital gain on tax on
sale of shares,
sale of non-listed shares, private shares. I think again, like I said, there are trade-offs. But at the same time, if we look into some of the initiatives that the government are doing in the capital market, for example, the government, the Prime Minister has announced that there will be more encouragement and incentive to encourage secondary market for private market instruments, for example. So I think the government is still studying, MOF is still studying on the mechanism and the rate. It's going to be low rate. For a start, it's going to be low rate for a start, and there's going to be threshold. So it's not like every unlisted share disposal you're going to be charged.
Has it been decided yet, the rate of the tax?
It's still being studied,
okay.
And we are going to consult stakeholders, including, you know, I've received concerns from the startup community. So I know a lot of startup communities operates on the basis of giving stocks to their talents,
investors,
to their investors, to their talents even. So I mean, we're going to consult all of them. There's going to be a threshold, and we're going to start at low rate.
Right. Now let's talk about the new luxury goods tax, which is will be introduced this year. What was the total sales of luxury goods sold in the country last year, and how much does the government expect to, you know, get in terms of tax collection from these taxable items for this year?
So we are looking at a region of 7 billion in terms of revenue of luxury goods sales last year.
That's actually quite a lot.
Yeah, it's quite a lot. But in this, I think we have to look into the spirit of these new taxes that are going to be introduced. I think the Prime Minister and the government is looking at how we can have a more equitable taxation. Right? What we're looking at is, of course, again, this is the ministry is still studying the tax structure, the rate, etc., the category of items that are going to be taxed. A lot of people ask me, am I going to be taxed for this item or that item? It's all this going to be studied, and we're going to consult stakeholders, including those from the tourism sector, because I know that many of them express concern that it may impact tourist spending. But I can assure you, the government, on the other hand, we have to look at tourism sector from a larger perspective. The government is putting in, for example, almost R1 billion to tourism ministry to look into how we can revive our tourism after the pandemic, how we can improve on the basic infrastructures leading to tourist attractions, how we can upgrade our heritage sites, etc. There's also a tax relief for the purchase of local crafts, arts and cultural crafts. And I think that itself gels very well with Malaysia as what we can offer as Malaysia in terms of tourism products. It's not just luxury good that we are looking at, but also local crafts. The anyaman, the songket, the batik, etc. So I think we have to look at tourism from that larger perspective.
Right. I think that's very fair. Sumbangan Tunai Rahmah, which comprises an allocation of nearly 8 billion ringgit. We're going to discuss a little bit on that. But before that, let's take a quick breather now, so stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us on Money Matters. Deputy Finance Minister Stephen Sim is in the studio with me now. Stephen, Sumbangan Tunai Rahmah, STR, comprises an allocation of nearly 8 billion ringgit, which is quite similar to the Bantuan Keluarga Malaysia we had last year. Compared with that and BSH, does the STR employ a different mechanism for its implementation, or is it just another name?
Right. I think this is one of the key cash transfer program the government rebranded into STR. But there is a slight difference in the sense that number one, STR takes into consideration the size of the household. So, for example, in the past, if your children, if a household with, say, beyond 2 to 3 children, they're going to get a flat rate to the end. But now we put in another threshold for those with 5 children and above. So we introduce another tier of cash transfer. And for recipients having a monthly income above 2,500 a month, we added, we gave an increase of cash payout according to the different numbers, the size of the household. And for those at the very bottom of the rung, they're going to get an additional 600 ringgit worth of food basket as well as food vouchers.
Okay.
So I think what we're trying to do here is to not only assist the poor, but also look into how this assistance can effectively impact them. You know, in terms of vis-a-vis the size of the household, vis-a-vis the rising cost of living, etc. So we want to look into all these factors when we give out our cash transfer.
To make sure that this cash assistance is distributed effectively, I think that's the key word there, right, Stephen? Right. Okay, now let's talk about the Subang and Pulau Pinang airports, which were also mentioned in the 2023 budget. How will this change the investment landscape in the Klang Valley Subang Airport and up in the north, Pulau Pinang Airport?
Mohammed, as I said at the beginning of my sharing, that this budget focused on strategic issues, things that are of immediate impact to the people, not big projects, which is why I think the Penang Airport, for example, I came from Penang, but that's not the reason why we are looking into Penang Airport.
Sure.
The Penang Airport expansion project has been proposed by MAHB, I think, even before 2018, right? So in 2019, there was actually an approval for this project to go on, but of course, because of the pandemic and because of the change of government, it was stopped. One of the reasons is this. It's very simple. The Penang Airport capacity has exceeded. The demand or the passenger arrival on the Penang Airport has exceeded its present capacity. We are looking at, the last upgrade of Penang Airport was about 10 years ago to the capacity of 6.5 million passengers a year. At this point, we are dealing with more than 8 million passengers a year. So it has already outgrown its present capacity, and we are looking at this third busiest airport in Malaysia, one of the industrial hub, the economic contributor to the country. So expanding the airport makes sense, number one. And expanding the airport helps to bring in not only tourists, but also business travelers and investment, etc. Same goes with the Subang Airport. It is now part of the Subang Airport transformation plan. We're going to make Subang Airport into the city airport. It is very near to travel from Subang to KL and Klang Valley, for example. So again, it has exceeded its capacity at 1.5 million capacity. We are looking at, it has gone double and triple the number of passengers coming to Subang. So I think we need that, and we want to make Subang Airport, for example, the business aviation hub, not just of Malaysia, but of the region.
Okay. Now let's move on to another key infrastructure project, the MRT3 project, which has been facing changes and delays since 2008. Today, the government is still reviewing the project's total cost. How long do you think this process will take? And do you believe that it is still on track, for completion by 2030? Or are we expecting any changes to the project so as to meet the new, the targeted price tag of below 45 billion ringgit?
I talk about being disciplined in our spending. And if we look at the history of this project, it has, when it was first introduced, it was at 68 billion.
Yeah, 68.
And then reduced to 50 billion. I mean, we have to look at big projects like this carefully. We have to analyze, we have to evaluate before we jump into another big mega projects. I think this is what the government is posturing. You know, careful with our spending. You know, you don't just spend big money like this without consideration of factors like cost. You know, I think the government, the officers are telling us they are confident to look at reduction of below 45 billion through savings in land acquisitions from or certain project management items. But most importantly, I think the government has also put a lot of investment, and it was announced in the budget on provision of public buses. You know, the My 50 pass is very popular in Klang Valley, is expanded to other states. I think this is what we are looking at. You know, careful spending, careful analysis of mega projects before we embark on it, and at the same time expanding public transports in other areas.
But are we expecting any changes at all to the project? Because some say that they wish that the government do not change too much because it's already intact, it's already good as it is. If you are changing some of it just for the sake of, you know, making the price lower than what it is today, then they said that it's not very, might as well you don't do it. So
I think the spirit of this is to maximize the ringgit, the value of our ringgit when we build. When we embark on a project, and this is definitely going to be looked into how we can have a proper, functional public transport system, in this case MRT, but at the same time with the best, most effective way of spending taxpayers' money.
Okay, Stephen, I wish we had more time, but the producer says that's it. Well, thank you very much for being with us today. Stephen Sim, Deputy Finance Minister and also MP for Bukit Mertajam. Now, for the past half an hour, you've been with us on Money Matters. Do join us same day, same time next week for more money insights that matter. I'm Muhammad Amhamdan. Have a great weekend and take care.